And hello from Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska. This is Mike Fitz with Explore.org. I'm standing here with Ranger Andrew from Katmai National Park. And we're going to be doing our live play-by-play broadcast starting at the top of the hour. So just a few minutes, and please stand by. And hello from Brooks River, Katmai National Park, Alaska. This is Mike Fitz with Explore.org. Ranger Andrew is standing by with me. We're going to do a live play-by-play from Brooks Falls in just a couple of minutes at the top of the hour. There are lots of bears around the waterfall tonight, so I think we're in for an exciting evening.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another play-by-play broadcast here on the Bear Cam, brought to you by Explore.org, a partnership with Explore.org and Katmai National Park and Preserve since 2012. My name is Andrew.
And my name is Mike Fitz.
And we are broadcasting tonight from the Falls platform here at Brooks Falls. This is a broadcast we do repeatedly during the peak season here in Katmai National Park. This is a broadcast where we will be essentially narrating bear activity here at the falls. This is a little bit different than the live chat Q&A style programs that we do from time to time. This will be more us talking, describing the activity of the bears we see in front of us.
Exactly, and hopefully we'll be able to answer as many of the questions that you might have about the bear and salmon activity. We're going to try to give you some idea of our understanding of why the bears are doing what they're doing. And as you can see, there's a lot of bears around the waterfall tonight. Andrew, how many are you counting?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of activity. I feel like every time I turn around, I see something else interesting happening. On the lip alone, right now, we have about 4 bears, 3 in front, 7, 3 more in front of that, about 10, 11, 3 more in the riffles. I'm seeing about 17 bears immediately in my view shed, and I'm not looking that hard.
And this is a peak season for bear activity at Brooks Falls, isn't it?
This is the big show, and it's all because of the salmon, the sockeye salmon, coming up from Bristol Bay in their annual run. They're coming up from Bristol Bay, returning from the ocean to spawn. We're expecting about 51.3 million fish to move through Bristol Bay. So far, about 1 million of those have come into the Naknek drainage, of which this is a part.
And there haven't been a lot of fish in the river today, and you can actually see the bears are a little feistier compared to last night already. In fact, number 856, the river's most dominant bear, just posed a challenge to another adult male, a smaller one, got right up in his face, and you can see 856 walking away right now. So again, when an interaction, 856 is the bear on the left, when an interaction happens between 2 bears, and it's not over a fishing spot or a specific food resource or access to a female, it's the male bear it's the bear that's more dominant that's gonna break off that encounter.
Right. So we have bear 856 there, sort of mid-river in near some of the boulders there. Moving towards us, what we call the jacuzzi, we have bear 480, nicknamed Otis. He's sort of a staple, a fixture around here, as many of these bears are, returning year after year. And he's also one of our older bears.
He is, yes. He's at least 22 years old, maybe a couple years older than that. We're not exactly sure. He's been in the jacuzzi a lot over the past hour or so, and I actually haven't seen him catch any fish there. So it's, again, well, he just proved me wrong there. He heard me talking, and he's like, oh yeah?
Prove you wrong.
All right. But very skilled in that location. There's another bear actually just sort of waiting his turn. And this is another large adult male. Seems like he didn't quite want to challenge 480 for that fishing spot. Maybe his temperament's just a little bit different tonight, but we've seen him push other bears out of that jacuzzi before.
Last night he was challenging other bears. And this is, Mike, if I'm not mistaken, this is an unidentified male bear. We're not exactly sure who that one is.
Right. I know a lot of camp viewers have their suspicions about who it might be, but I'm going to refrain from venturing a guess or an opinion, because I really am not sure about his identification. Based on his activity, I do suspect that he is a bear that's familiar with Brooks Falls. Mm-hmm. He seems very familiar with the waterfall, how to fish here. So
very in his element.
Yes. Yeah, so this bear in the jacuzzi right now is probably one that has experience here before. It's just maybe not one that we've seen here in July.
Right. And so it's worth noting, a lot of these bears, they will return year after year, and that's kind of what makes the Brooks area special, is that we're able to sort of follow the lives of these bears because we see them season after season. We're able to follow their lineage, developments in their life, and fill in a lot of blank spots in their biography, more so than other places, especially in our national park system.
This is really the first place for me where I was able to learn about the individual tendencies of individual animals. You know,
Right.
Other national parks I had been in, I had seen wildlife, but it was very like a passing glimpse of a bear or a passing glimpse of a bighorn sheep or something like that. I never really had that opportunity, and I think that's actually really unique and special about the Bear Cam experience, is that we do get to watch these animals year after year, season after season.
And sort of moving back towards the back wall there, just beyond that identified male, we have 2 bears that often look very similar. I believe, is that 747 in the front or in the middle there?
Yeah, 747 near the log.
Yep.
Yep, yeah, one of the biggest bears in the river, if not the heftiest. And then behind him, again, that very dominant adult male, 856.
Yep.
Sometimes those bears get confused, and I confuse them occasionally, because
Absolutely.
very large animals. Their faces are different. 856, you might be able to see, has a tendency to sort of like lick his lips a lot.
Yes.
Don't know why he does that. Not all bears do it, but he seems to do that quite frequently. 747 has a blockier muzzle and is more brown
shorter,
overall.
yeah. Deeper chocolate. And then back against the wall there, sort of in the shadows. Who do we have there, Mike?
That is number 634, nicknamed Popeye. Especially when he was a younger bear, he had very large furry forearms, hence the nickname. Fairly blonde ears right now. Classic looking grizzly or brown bear. Very prominent shoulder hump. A wide face, dish-shaped face with a muzzle that projects out a fairly blocky muzzle.
Yeah.
So easy to recognize him. And again, if you were to pick out of a profile or a lineup of these bears, you were to say which one looks most classically like a brown and grizzly bear, he would maybe be most people's
Classic
selection.
brown bear, yes. When you think of Alaskan brown bears, that's sort of the image that comes into your mind. And Bear 480 is moving back towards the falls, not in the jacuzzi. He did not displace that unidentified male, but he is reapproaching.
Yeah, and it seems like maybe he just wants to hang out, maybe wait his turn.
Yeah.
He's a big bear, and he can often get to the fishing spots that he chooses to.
Right.
But he does have to contend with the larger male bears. So each one of these bears that we were just talking about kind of lined up below Brooks Falls, a lot of times he is subordinate to them. So he'll more often wait his turn than try to challenge them.
And then we have currently 3 bears on this front part of the lip.
And one adult male bear that
approaching.
Is fairly recognizable. You can see those other bears right now. They are
backing up.
Right. They're smaller.
Clear in the room.
They see that bigger adult male coming, and they just get out of his way.
And I'm noticing a little bit funky ear there.
Right.
Maybe his trademark. That is what we call Bear 775, nicknamed Lefty. And I would say he's one of the more prolific fishermen we have here.
On the lip, he's very skilled.
Yeah.
There again, not too many fish jumping this evening, so he hasn't caught that many, but I've seen him catch a couple. And a couple years ago, if you're not familiar with his story, he showed up actually 3 years ago in 2015, and he really had no idea how to fish this place.
He showed up, and it's from the video, you can almost imagine the dialogue going through his head. Oh my gosh, these fish everywhere. He was sort of freaking out, it seems. And his head was bouncing back and forth, and he just decided to dive over the falls. Did a little bit of a belly flop. Some classic bear cam video.
And yeah, since that time, he's settled down quite a bit. Seems to realize, hey, I can make a living without having to expend a ton of energy if I just stand on the lip of the waterfall.
And you and I were talking about this the other day, Mike. When it comes to fishing at Brooks Falls, patience can be a virtue. The most experienced, most dominant males oftentimes will just sit and let the fish come to them.
And on the lip of the waterfall, a couple of younger bears that seemed like just to be lining up in the queue there, like they actually want.
Right.
They want to get there, but they have to wait their turn.
And they are sort of vocalizing at each other.
Yeah, they're about the same size, but you could definitely.
But beyond them, next to, we have a little bit of interaction on top of the falls. Looks, is that, let's see. A showdown over space.
Yeah, it looks like that's 856. And then a young, or I don't know if she's young, but that's an adult female. One of those adult females that remains unidentified for the time being. And 856 really got up in her face. I missed the first part of that. Yeah. Maybe she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Simultaneously, 775 is challenging 409 for a fish.
Right, and 409 is a female we haven't talked about yet this evening, but she's on the lip a lot.
And meanwhile, 856 is taking advantage of the situation.
Right, he's not actually playing peacekeeper, but maybe he just doesn't want that other adult male to assert his dominance. Right. And he's there to remind him, hey, I'm the big man on campus. You can see 409 though is not yielding her fish.
And she is one of our more experienced lip fishers as well. And in addition to being probably the largest female on the Brooks River.
And 775 is really not being super aggressive about that, but he's reaching in just a little bit. And 409 really gave him
409 going for his other ear.
Right. Yeah,
Mike Tyson, we call that.
And sometimes bears get their ears ripped off. We've seen that happen here before. In fact, there was one bear nicknamed the Vander who kind of lost his ear around, I think, the same time that Evander Holyfield had his ear bitten. So that's where that nickname came from. But 775 stole that fish successfully. It was a little bit of a slow approach.
Yeah.
But 409 wasn't backing away, and she actually was at a bit of a disadvantage there.
There's lots of activity here right now. 856 chasing 775.
And that just happened right below us. I wasn't able to catch that quickly enough.
856 did chase 775 off in front of the platform, and now they're chasing each other downriver. Mike, this is very similar to another time when you and I were doing a play-by-play. 856 was chasing 634 downriver that time.
Yeah, and that ended up with in the death of a cub. It just was a unfortunate place for the mother bear to be. Wrong place, wrong time. 856 took advantage of
I believe that was about 8
cub
days ago now.
Yeah, a cub in a vulnerable situation. And now that 856 has asserted his dominance over that other adult male down there, it looks like he's broken off the chase. The other one's sort of slinking away. 856 just staring him down. And those are both downstream in the island. So last night, again, we were seeing a lot of bears catching a lot of fish. Not nearly as many aggressive interactions between the animals. But bears, you know, when they don't have a lot of food in their bellies, they're definitely a bit more cranky.
Like
if I'm
people,
gonna,
yes.
if I'm gonna anthropomorphize just a bit, maybe they do get a little hangry.
Right.
The tolerance level for bears definitely does seem to increase between bears when they're catching a lot of fish. So on a night like tonight, where there's not as many salmon in the river, it definitely leads to more aggressive encounters and more competition for fishing space.
And 856 is walking back onto the scene from the island.
And it'll be interesting to kind of watch him come up to the falls too, because he really has kind of free reign about where he wants to go. So we'll see probably him yield or cause other bears to yield their spot.
It looks almost like he was trying to scratch his back on the shrub there. There used to be a tree at one time.
Yeah, doing a little bit of marking there. It's a visual signal for other bears that says, hey, look how big and tough I am and fit I am. It also leaves scent behind. They're often urinating on the ground when they do this.
Sort of chemical indicator. We're seeing, I believe that was 480 who was in the jacuzzi. Moving to the side as 856 steps up.
Yeah, and 480 just saw 856 coming and decided, hey, it's not worth the risk. I am just gonna get out of that bear's way. And again, that's how most interactions between brown bears are. They're just avoidance more than anything.
And then, is that the unidentified male we see walking on top of the falls now?
Oh, that's 775 again.
He's back. He looped
that's
around.
Lefty.
Snuck around on us. Okay.
Yeah, coming back to the waterfall. Those younger bears you saw got out of the way again, avoiding him. 409, generally fairly tolerant of other bears, so she's not really making much of an issue of his presence. I wonder if the next time she catches a fish, however, if she'll go to a more secluded spot to try to eat it.
And 409 seems to be deciding it's not worth it to fish that closely for the time being.
Yeah, maybe 775 there just made her a little uncomfortable after that fish stealing incident that they had just a moment ago. And a lot of bears just standing or sitting and looking at the water. Again, very reflective of the fishing conditions tonight.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the salmon are coming up, but it's not in a steady stream. It is sort of in pulses, as we've been saying. Fish will come up in spurts from Bristol Bay. About 1 million into this drainage so far.
And the salmon run is going to begin to taper off. It's usually about this time of the year where the peak of the migration period happens, and it's definitely a true bell curve. Like there's going to be salmon trickling into the area into the beginning of August. Sockeye salmon, I should say. We'll have other species of salmon moving to this area about that time, but not nearly as many. 99% of the fish that you end up finding at Brooks River are going to be sockeye salmon, and we're kind of at the peak of that migration right now.
And today, July 11th, this fish have been running really in earnest for about 2 weeks now. The last few days of June, they began to show up.
And I think a lot of these bears, when you look at them, they reflect the healthy run that's moved through so far. Very fat animals.
Yeah, we were commenting on the bear cams today with some bear cam viewers about that these bears do seem to be a little bit heavier than they may have been in previous seasons, perhaps reflective of the large runs we had last year, and it's expected to continue this year. Last year was, I believe, the 4th largest salmon run for Bristol Bay since records have been kept.
And when you have exceptional numbers of fish like that, it's very good for the ecosystem as a whole. The salmon fertilize the watersheds. I mean, these would be very nutrient poor areas without sockeye salmon.
So salmon, they're growing up in fresh water, and then they head out to the sea where they'll spend their adulthood, and all that weight they put on their bodies absorbing tiny sea creatures, they bring all of that back to the interior. So it's this massive transfer of nutrients from the open ocean to these relatively nutrient poor lakes and rivers.
Downstream, we also have a few bears that are fishing. Maybe we'll pan down there while the action at the falls is tapered off just a little bit.
So we're looking now down towards what we call the riffles.
And in the middle of the riffles is an adult male. It's about as far as I can zoom in. This is number 151.
Nicknamed Walker. And he's been in the riffles quite a bit this year. Last year we saw him at the falls a fair amount. This year he's been hanging out in the back.
And we get asked about him sometimes. I think in a recent live chat too, we got asked, well, why is he down there so much when he was at the falls before? And of course, we don't really know. That's one of those questions I wish I could ask him. But it seems like, he's probably just finding a way to make a living down there. And he perhaps doesn't want to face the competition up at the waterfall itself. So
the other larger males may be seeming more intimidating to him this year. With all that weight they put on, it's hard to say.
Definitely far fewer large adult males fish down in that area.
Yes.
So if that's your main competition, and he's big enough that he can usually displace most of the females. If your main competition is larger adult males, then going down river can give you a little bit of space just to fish on your own, where you don't have to worry too much about that. Walking right in front of him, it looks like number 274, who's also a bear about his age, so maybe around 11 years old or so.
A little bit larger.
Very wide set ears. He changes a lot from early summer to fall. Maybe he'll walk upriver. We'll try to see where he tries to fit in at the waterfall. There's a lot of bears in the most productive fishing spots, so there might not be too much room for him when he gets up here.
Yeah, and while we're looking at all these bears in the immediate vicinity, it's worth noting, at least on my walk here, there are a lot of bears hanging out in the periphery. I encountered at least 4 bears on the walk to this platform.
Yeah, so walking the Brooks Falls sometimes can be half the adventure. It's quite common for people to see bears on the trail to the waterfall.
Half the adventure is getting there, yes, or half the excitement. It is not a straight line trail. It curves quite a bit, and there's quite a bit of vegetation that is perfectly suited to disguise bears until you're very, very close.
And you can get a little bit of an indication of what the forest around here looks like just by looking at the vegetation on the edges of the river. On the trail to Brooks Falls, it's a bit more of a coniferous forest. There's more spruce trees as a component. So what you see across the river is a bit more deciduous, but there's a lot of grass in the understory in that coniferous forest. So So and the grass right now in many places is sometimes 4 feet high, so it hides a lot of animals.
You can only see a bear coming sometimes with its ears sticking above the grass. It's quite a sight. Large animals can disappear quite easily. 775, getting quite excited, bouncing up and down, sort of head bobbing on the lip.
And that's kind of a diagnostic characteristic of him. There's not really a lot of bears that will fish the lip that bob their head up and down really excitedly like that. I think right now he's probably the only one that I would say does that on a regular basis.
Although at one point we did have a bear nicknamed Head Bob.
Yes, and he got that nickname because he did something similar.
Yeah.
I never observed him doing it as frequently as 775, but he certainly did do it. And that was a bear that actually lived to be fairly old. He was probably in his late 20s the last time he was observed. Could have been closer to 30. We're not really sure, but he was identified as an adult male in 1988, a young adult male. And then he was last observed around 2009 or so. So he was certainly up there in years when we last saw him. And brown bears often live until they're about 20 years old. That's a fairly average lifespan for them. Oh, and 409 with a really skilled catch there, reaching down to grab it out of midair.
Using that paw that she usually has raised. And wow, 775 really going with the head bob.
He's so focused on the water, it doesn't look like he's really going to go over and try to challenge 409 for that fish. And maybe that little, grab of the ear that she did, that with the jaws,
smart.
Maybe it does smart. Maybe that is a reason why he's still over there. But you could see him. That bobbing of the head. I wonder if that's a bit of excitement or frustration.
Yeah.
When they're really well fed, sometimes they don't do that.
And that's what we saw last night. The bears were a little bit more lethargic and slow moving than they seem to be tonight.
And 409's not eating her fish exceptionally fast. I've clocked bears eating a whole salmon in less than a minute, so she's mostly taking her time with it. Doesn't look like she's going to leave any leftovers from this one, except for maybe some of the entrails, but she's definitely not eating it nearly as quickly as she can.
274, slowly moving closer. Again, this light colored bear, very wide set ears, very wide face.
This is a bear that we believe was first brought here by its mother as a young cub, born in 2007. So he's been back to Brooks River every year since then, if memory serves correctly.
And with some real clumpy patches on his rear, his shed pattern looking a little patchy.
You can see him hovering kind of around those big adult males. Again, he's not big enough to compete with 856 or 747. Trying to find a to see salmon density is just low enough that if he tried to run through the water there, he would likely be unsuccessful. And really in the last, what would you say, probably 15 or 20 minutes or so, we've seen very few fish being caught. Otis caught one, 409 caught a couple.
Yeah.
755 stole one, and now we have a bear I don't think we've...
Yeah, this is a bear we don't see very often. And we often get that question, when the fish are really pumping, there may not be a lot of bears, and visitors will ask, well, if there's so much fish, why aren't they here? Well, and that kind of makes sense on some level. If there's more fish moving, jumping, they can get their fill quicker, and they don't need to stick around as long. Whereas right now, fish are harder to come by tonight. they'll be sticking around a little bit longer to get those calories.
And that bear ate that fish very quickly. That was certainly less than a minute. I didn't have my my stopwatch out for that, but very, very quickly. So that was an indication that he's a hungry bear.
409 back in place after eating that fish. And she does alternate. She'll always have one, not always, but often at least have one paw raised. And she alternates between right and left.
And that's one of the sort of behavioral characteristics that you can use to identify 409. Standing on the lip like that with a paw raised right now is pretty much a guarantee that you're going to be looking at her. And downstream of the bears, directly adjacent to the waterfall, just about 20 yards or so, standing up in the water. This looks to be number 284, another bear who was raised here in the Brooks River area. She has fairly blonde ears, sometimes a prominent shoulder hump, especially when she sheds out. She's also a bear that's highly habituated to the presence of people. So
very, very much so. If I'm not mistaken, Mike, I believe her mother was 708.
Yes.
And 708 would take her through Brooks Camp, the developed area, fairly often as a cub. And she has done the same with her cubs in the past.
And bears will change their habits as they age and mature. In fact, when I first came to Katmai, everybody knew 708. Even pretty much every visitor that came to Brooks River knew 708 because she was always near the lodge. People will come up to me and be like, "That Amelia bear is grazing on grass again near the lodge," and we'd have to keep people away, and the bear technicians would have to try to chase her away from the buildings. And 708 right now is not really a well-known bear for a lot of the people that stick just right around Brooks Camp.
She does not come through camp as much as she used to.
And I'm kind of wondering if that's going to be the case with 284 as well, as she sort of matures. Because she's not that old of a female right now. I think she was born in 2008.
But she does get fairly assertive with anglers or park staff when she does come through camp.
In each one of the bears, if I have a close encounter with them, just because I've seen them maybe hundreds of times, that doesn't mean that this situation isn't unique and I shouldn't approach it as a unique situation. Each one of these bears has a tolerance for each other and their own tolerances for people, their own definitions of personal space. And you definitely don't want your behaviors to be misinterpreted by the animal, where they
no
would
room for
feel
miscommunication with bears. And like people, bears occasionally have bad days. They get in different moods of various sorts, and definitely do not want to impede on their personal space. 284, though, she does have a relatively prominent hump as well. That sort of classic grizzly hump or brown bear hump.
But sometimes, Andrew, dealing with bears, in my opinion, can be a little bit easier than dealing with people, because they know if you know how to read their cues, they'll tell you what's on their mind. Sometimes you don't have enough time to think about it in a surprise encounter, but they'll definitely let you know what they, what if they're feeling defensive or curious or maybe ambivalent about your presence. And we're about halfway through our broadcast, so I think it might be a good time to introduce myself, or reintroduce myself. And my name is Mike Fitz. I'm a fellow with Explore.org.
And my name is Andrew. I'm a park ranger here at Katmai National Park and Preserve. We're here in Southwest Alaska at Brooks Falls. This is a play-by-play. This is a broadcast we do pretty regularly during peak season here on the Brooks River, where we sort of provide some commentary, some insight into what the bears might be doing here. Mike, I don't know if we're able to get it in frame, but we do have Bear 435 and her two cubs sort of lingering in the periphery.
Definitely. Let's try to get her in the frame here. So I'm going to pan down.
Let me know if we need to back up a little bit. So there, just there in the corner, you can see the two cubs 435 has one lighter cub and one darker. They are yearlings this year. And I believe is this Mike her fourth litter?
Third litter, as far as I know.
Third litter.
Yeah, at least that we've observed her with. Sometimes bears probably have cubs, and then the cubs don't survive on the trip to Brooks Camp. So we have to assume those are minimum estimates when people say, you know, they've had 3 or 4 litters.
Yeah.
But this is definitely the third one that we know of hers.
So the lighter one looks a little bit more like her mom as far as fur color.
And these are both females too.
We know that now.
And we didn't know that before.
We did not know that, as I would say, maybe 2 weeks ago. And the reason we know that is because we have seen them urinate. And if you see them urinate backwards, you know it's a female. If the urine goes down, it is a male. And it is relatively uncommon to see cubs up here and mom so far away. These are yearlings, so it's not as if they're smaller spring cubs, but we haven't seen very many cubs at the falls this year.
Yeah, a lot of the females that will fish at the falls with cubs either aren't here or don't have cubs this year.
Right.
So number 402, we haven't seen her yet this year. Number 128, we've seen here a lot, but she doesn't have offspring to care for. So you know, there's no need for her to come up here with cubs. She doesn't have any. Off of the ground here where our feet are standing, so you know, 16 feet.
We see these cubs from a distance, they look so small. When they get close, this would be one of the larger dogs I've ever seen.
These are big animals. I mean, they're probably close to 100 pounds to 150 pounds at this age.
And a lot of muscle already.
Right. And a lot of black bears at that size will reproduce, you know, at that size. So these are sizable animals, and in their second year, you know, they can easily weigh over 200 pounds, and that's part of the productivity of the ecosystem at work. Other brown and grizzly bear populations without really rich food resources like we have here in Katmai don't grow nearly as fast.
And we see that in Denali and Yellowstone. The bears also have to move a lot more in those places to get the food.
And it looks like they're looking pretty hard for any leftover salmon on the ground. Yesterday and the day before, when they came to that spot, they were actually ignoring bits of salmon that were there, so they were really full at that time, but of course their stomach empties out fairly easily.
New day, new appetite. And so the cubs are here in front of platform. I have not been able to see, from my perspective, Mom, Bear 435.
Yeah, and she was here earlier before the broadcast, so I suspect she's just out of our line of sight.
Yeah.
But she's not right on top of them, and you can see that this cub is fairly relaxed, just trying to find scraps, maybe chewing on a little bit of vegetation down there. It has some entrails that were left over that it's chewing on.
Resting on its paw.
Now doing a nice squat. So, just kind of chewed on that salmon and spit it out.
Unfortunately, it looks like a visitor dropped a Kleenex.
Oh, is that what that was? I couldn't tell. Okay.
Appears to be a dropped tissue.
And that was an example about how bears are just kind of curious about anything that's different, or perhaps that had a little bit of odor on it.
Yeah.
And
sort of like babies, bears explore the world with their mouths. But there also is a reason that we encourage visitors to keep all their belongings tight and close so they don't drop anything.
And here at Brooks River, you can't leave any property unattended. So if you were walking along the trail and you wanted to set your bag down on the ground and walk away with it or from it for just a few seconds, you can't actually do that, because bears, if they end up finding it, are so curious. Not only could the property be destroyed, but the bears can learn to associate that item as basically a toy, even if there's no food in it. And then they're more likely to approach us in the future to try to get those things from us. We don't want them to learn that we actually have toys.
Three bears still on the lip there. We have 775 and 409 catching another one.
Yeah, it looks like her catch rate is certainly higher than the other bears tonight.
And Mike, do you have any idea who the bear she just walked past? That sort of slightly smaller.
Yeah, that's that one of our unidentified females for the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. So she has a scar on her right hip.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we're looking at photos from last year or the year before, we might want to look for a wound or a persistent scar on her that might help us to know if she has been to the river before and been captured in a monitoring session. But she has a fairly narrow muzzle, fairly neatly parted fur on her forehead. So she's fairly recognizable. It makes me think that if she was here in the past, we might recognize her fairly easily. But
just in front of the
I'm not
platform, we do have bear 435, and she might be turning around, Mike, so I don't know if
Okay.
we're going to be able to get her. She might be turning around.
yeah, it looks like she just moved out of the way, and I think that might have been in response to 856 catching a fish. He was in the jacuzzi,
Yeah.
caught a fish, sort of moved into the shallows here to eat it, and she just saw him and decided, you know what, that's a big bear. He's aggressive. I've had experience with him in the past, and I'm just going to keep my distance. .856 is very skilled in the jacuzzi. Again, a lot of those big adult males that have had a lot of opportunity to practice fishing that location are.
Yeah.
You don't get very big like that without knowing how to catch fish. And the jacuzzi is a very productive spot. So this bear, 747, 480, a lot of those very dominant adult bears are very skilled at the jacuzzi. You can see the gulls haven't had a lot of food tonight either. Look how close they're getting to 856, really waiting for anything that's left over.
Knocking at the door. And they do not mind getting that close.
And people do wonder occasionally why the bears don't go after the gulls. And I suspect because it's not an easy meal for them. The gulls are actually pretty quick. The bears are quick, but I think the gulls are fairly quick and may be able to avoid them more often than not.
Yeah, and the gulls can move in a number of directions, whereas salmon tend to be in a higher density this time of year in the river, and they can only move essentially in shallow water like this in two directions, or two dimensions rather.
I also suspect, and I don't know if most bears actually have the opportunity to eat a bird, but a full-grown bird has a lot of feathers.
Feathers.
And it might be uncomfortable to try to slide those feathers down
A
your
lot of
stomach.
wrapping, yes.
Yeah. Because bears don't pluck their prey like a cat will, for
Right.
example. They don't pull the fur off; they just start to consume it. And every once in a while, we will see bears catching an uncommon prey here, like beavers, for example.
Yeah.
If a beaver is swimming through the river, the bears will see something brown and furry moving through the water, and they'll go after it. So we've seen that happen.
Triggers that chase response. And right in front of the platform here, we have bear 274 walking by. Again, blondish or a lighter brown with very wide set ears.
And we haven't actually talked about his brother, suspected brother, here tonight, and that's number 83.
83, nicknamed Wayne Brother.
And those bears are from different litters. So 274 that we're looking at right now is from a litter, again, born in 2007. And then he had the same mother, suspected with number 83, but that was from a litter from several years before that. 83 is a fairly mature adult male in his mid-teens right now. Likes to fish that chute downstream of Brooks Falls. He'll come over to the jacuzzi. He's mid to high level in the hierarchy, but it depends on what other bears are doing. He certainly isn't as dominant as the most dominant bears here. And like every bear this evening, trying to be patient, waiting for the salmon to come to him.
Patient, not necessarily by choice. The fish do tend to be a little bit lighter tonight versus last night. Just to recap, I see immediately in our front view here 1, 2, 5, 7, 11, 13 bears. And 274 and
Definitely a fairly aggressive encounter here.
yeah,
Almost a three-way encounter because that male bear came in, chased off 274, and then 856 got right up in his face.
Not here. I'm the top guy. I'm the most dominant.
And we can't hear it, but there's you can look at this male bear that's closest to us. And he's doing a little bit of jaw popping. You might be able to see his jaws going up and down. That's definitely a sign of stress.
This bear showing a lot of wounds on his back.
Yes, he's definitely had some recent battles from this year. Actually, he kind of thought about marking that tree right in front of 856, which would have been interesting. That was a sort of half-hearted attempt, and you can now 856 is kind of follow, perhaps, but these bears are in a extended little
The
confrontation.
bear that just came out short is drooling quite a bit, salivating.
Little bit of cowboy walking as he walked away, and that's an exaggerated gait that
Sort of swagger.
yeah, it's basically a demonstration of size and dominance. 856 slowly following him. 856 might want to go back to fish, so maybe he's more interested in doing that than challenging the other bear.
He did let out a huff.
That other bear is just right up in the trees, though, and he's just out of our line of sight in those willows. Oh, he might be moving off just a little bit further, but unfortunately we're not going to really be able to see him through the trees.
And he may be reapproaching.
And we're on the edge of the wildlife viewing platform here, so try to look through those trees, and in the center of your view is that other bear.
And he is now turning. I'm gonna go behind the platform. Let me know if I need to move out of the way, Mike.
Yeah, if you could just for a moment. So, walking in the
856
grass
in
there.
pursuit.
The 856 definitely following him, so giving a little bit of challenge. This is a lot of posturing. This sometimes happens between big adult males. They don't, of course, resort to fighting unless they really want or have to.
A lot of it is bluster and bluffing.
A56 continuing to follow that other bear. That bear, was probably urinating on the ground. 856 through the trees right now, following almost in the bear's exact same path.
And in a very exaggerated cowboy walk there on 856, almost stomping with each of his hind legs.
So again, a visual display for the other bear, if they can see one another, that says, hey, this is I'm big, I'm tough.
Very wide, powerful steps.
Yeah, now they're approaching one another in the grass over there. I wish I got a better look at that adult male's face. Maybe we could try to identify him, but now that adult male's approaching, whoops, and I slipped him out of the frame there, approaching 856. And marking the tree right in front of him, so that's a kind of a bold move.
Could be taken as a challenge.
So that bear, that was a pretty big brown bear, and it was one that I didn't recognize. We could still kind of see him through some of the willows over there, still rubbing on some of the trees, but definitely not one who's willing to yield to 856. And this is one of the very interesting things about our bear hierarchy. It's a very fluid hierarchy. It can change from day to day. You can understand for the most part where bears are going to sit depending on their age, their sex, and their size. So adult males that are big are going to be at the top of the hierarchy, but where those individuals sort of fall into that is kind of up to them from almost on a daily basis.
That unidentified bear seems to be re-angling back towards the river. 856 again with that really wide sort of cowboy walk, those hind legs. Nope.
And that other bear is still back in the grass.
Again, these large bears
Yeah.
disappear so easily in this tall grass. And in another back scratch. This is not a case of the bear standing up to get a better view or investigate the situation.
Yeah, definitely a display of size and strength. And I got to look at that bear's face, and I think it might be number 32 Chunk.
You think this could be 32 Chunk?
I think this could be number 32, and we haven't seen him yet this year.
A little bit lighter than the last time we saw him at the end of last year.
Yes, yeah, he's very dark in the fall, but the shed patterns match, his facial profile matches. So if you can look him up in the Bear ID book, if you're not familiar with that, just type in Katmai eBooks into Google, and you can find the link and download the book from there.
So Bear 32 possibly returning to the Brooks River with some interesting encounters between 856 and 32 last year. Again, 856 is thought to be the most dominant bear in the river, but there was one occasion at least where he did yield space to 32.
And definitely 32, and that's a tentative idea. I don't want anyone to say absolutely for sure until we get a better look at him. But 32 is not backing down to the approach of 856, so...
They're still in relatively close proximity to one another.
I think number 32 here, again, if it is that bear, he was classified as a 2.5-year-old in 2007 or so, so he's really coming into the prime of his size and strength.
Mid-teens, yep.
And that's usually about the time where we see the age where we see bears attaining their greatest strength and rank in the hierarchy. Unlike female bears, adult males can devote really all of their resources into growing large, because they don't have to devote any resources into raising offspring. So
they do not have those other mouths to feed. Males have no part in raising the young, raising the cubs. And we can hear that large branch snapping as what could possibly be Bear 32 leaning against it, tearing it down. Continuing to walk away for the time being.
In 856, it's hard to see. He's been sitting here watching this the whole time. He's been in the grass. You can see his ears just behind that birch tree.
Showing quite a bit of restraint, actually, compared to what we've seen this bear do in the past.
Oftentimes, yeah, 856 is right up in those other bears' faces. So maybe he recognizes something in the challenger that says, I'm going to have to, approach this carefully. Mm-hmm. And again, bears are smart. They know when to pick their battles. They don't want to risk injury if they don't have to. And 32 is, again, still back there, that other adult male, still back behind that willow. I can see bits of branches flying, but I can't actually see the bear. So he's still back there marking.
Small bits of debris from cracking branches. I can't see the bear itself.
Meanwhile, we're talking about this, and all the other bears are just going about their business.
Well, we're focused on these two specific bears. We have a solid, I would say, almost 10 bears in our immediate vicinity.
Yeah, and very few aggressive interactions during this time between those other bears. And we'll try to follow this, because this is a very interesting encounter. Mm-hmm. We often don't see, adult males encounter one another for the first time like this. So we'll try to stay with it as long as at least one of them is in our line of sight. 32 was moving back, and it looks like now he turned away. Maybe
and 856 has returned to the water. Climbing up towards the falls, it would seem.
Yeah, so he's walking away, and I don't know if he's going to move to challenge 30. No, actually, it looks like maybe he's trying to find a tree of his own to mark. So hard to see there in the trees, but he's working that spruce tree. And this is a lot of bluster. There, again, 32 is not within my line of sight, so
We will keep an eye out, see if he does reapproach, but for the time being, 856 is back at the river, and what could possibly be 32 disappeared into the trees beyond. And it is interesting, there is a little bit of syncopation and percussion happening on the lip of the falls right now. 775 with the head bob and the occasional pounding of the paws from 409.
in these events that we've been witnessing tonight, the interactions between the bears is one of the things that does make bear watching very exciting here at Brooks River.
It does.
I mean, these are all wild animals. This isn't a show that they're putting on for our entertainment, but it really does help to illustrate just how fierce their world is.
Absolutely.
The competition that they have to go through is real, and it's
is.
very significant.
It is real, and as we saw with the death of that spring cub about 8 days ago, the costs are genuine.
So the bears at the waterfall right now, taking their time, being patient, waiting for salmon. 775, his head bobs seem to be getting even more animated.
Right.
Almost like his hunger is growing by the moment, and he can't control it.
You have a few bears waiting over on the far riverbank. I don't know if you, Mike, are able to make out who that is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell. I think the one that's maybe up on the bank there could be 755.
Nicknamed Scaredy Bear.
The one that's sitting downstream of him on the bank there, I think is number 89 backpack.
And we look.
And we're gonna, well, maybe we'll return to these bears, but it looks like, yeah, maybe number 32 here.
Possible 32
Yeah.
coming back to the riverbank. 856 we still haven't seen come back from up there. We can sort of make a little bit of 856 out just near the fish ladder there.
Yeah, he's actually up in that spruce tree just to the left of the waterfall. He's still sitting in there.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens when 32 comes down, if 856 decides to come down and posture with him or ignore him. Or if we'll see if 32 here will decide to do his own bit of posturing. This is a very large bear walking right below us here. Adult male, 700 to 900 pounds at this time of the year, and he's probably pushing about that upper limit.
And he's already looking like a very healthy bear, and going to add quite a bit of weight in the next several weeks and months.
And 856 didn't move down to make any challenges to him. He's just still sitting up there. So I think we might need to see more interactions between these two bears to know whether or not one is more dominant than the other.
And if that is indeed Bear 32, this would be the first time that we saw him this season. It'll be interesting to see if he sticks around, especially now that the fish are here. He's certainly not looking like he's in need of a whole lot of food. So he's been eating wherever he has been hanging out.
Yes, yeah, he definitely looked like a big, healthy bear, still had a lot of fat reserves on him. So wherever he was over the last month or so, he's been doing well. And one of the rangers did report seeing him back in May kind of move through the area. One of our Ranger Dave, if you're familiar with the bear cams, he reported seeing 32 back in May. So that bear's been out and about, maybe courting females this time of the year. We're not really sure, but that's one main activity. If a big adult male isn't at Brooks River, that could be one thing that he's occupied with.
And we have just a few minutes left in this play-by-play broadcast. If you're just tuning in, this is something we will do fairly regularly during the peak season here, almost on a nightly basis.
And this really is prime time for the bears at Brooks River.
This is.
This is the peak of probably the bear numbers that we have on the river. This week in July typically brings the most bears to Brooks River. So yeah, try to take advantage of it if you're watching at home. because you're going to see maybe more bears now than you will throughout the rest of the year.